So let me start by talking about where we were just a few years ago. To turn the clock back to 2019. We had created an extraordinarily tightly integrated world economy to a degree that we'd never seen before. There was in many ways, there was a global economy already in 1913, which was then torn apart by war, as it turned out, and up until about the 1980s, all we really did was to reconstruct that global economy through a gradual process of trade liberalization and a long stretch of peace. But between something like 1985 and over the next 25 years or so, something extraordinary happened. We developed a system of incredibly complex global supply chains that had never existed before. And that was made possible largely by technology, often rather prosaic technology, not so much information technology as container shipping, although aided by IT, which helped you to coordinate these complex operations. It was a combination of new forms of organizing production, reduced shipping costs, better communications, made it possible to have this highly integrated economy. The question, all of this now, is are we about to see not just a plateauing, but a retreat? We had come to take it for granted that complex, multi-stage production taking place where a given, where is this made? And the answer, that's a complicated question, right? The last stop is China, but it's the components come from many places along the way. We come to take it for granted that was a process that could be counted upon to work smoothly. Already, even before recent events, there were starting to be questions. There was a limited movement of international corporations to move production closer to markets because they were starting to believe that they'd gotten overextended, that their logistics was too fragile. With the coming of COVID-19, all of a sudden we realized that the logistics was far more fragile than anyone had realized. Nobody really talked about supply chains except people for whom it was their job until 2020. But then all of a sudden, we realized that, in fact, that these complex production networks depend upon a quite very specific set of facilities. They depend upon a limited number of containers, of ports. Any major shock to the system can produce disruptions. And so during the pandemic, consumption shifted from services to goods. You couldn't go out to a restaurant, so you bought yourself better cooking equipment for your home, that sort of thing. And the supply chains couldn't handle that shift in demand. So we discovered that the logistical system was far more fragile than we realized. We also had a clear increase in geopolitical tensions. Political risk was already starting to become a concern. You can say that the trade conflict between the U.S. and China was very idiosyncratic, but still we live in a world of growing nationalism. We live in a world in which there is no clear global hegemon to enforce the rules in the way there used to be. So there were concerns. And then came the war. The economics of the war have been full of surprises. And many of the initial assumptions, obviously, many of the initial assumptions about how it would go militarily have been proved totally wrong. Many of the assumptions that we had about the economics have been proved wrong as well. Right after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, most of the discussion was about the possibility of Western, or I should say generally democracies, the democratic allies of the world, being able to impose effective sanctions against Russian exports and starving Putin's regime of cash. That has not succeeded. There have been some impacts, but basically it has not been effective. The commodities that Russia exports are too fungible, too easily sold to different markets, so it doesn't matter if the United States decides it won't buy any Russian oil. It doesn't matter. India will buy it instead. It's been just has not been possible to effectively embargo the exports. Surprisingly, what has happened is that sanctions on the other side have been surprisingly effective. The Western world, sorry, I should say the Allied world, because Korea is actually very much part of this. The democratic powers have managed to curtail sales of, particularly of strategic or of crucial inputs to Russia. So instead of having a collapse of exports, Russia had a collapse of imports, found itself flush with cash, and unable to spend it. Now that is starting to become somewhat more porous, but the effective economic sanctions have been against Russia's ability to import. So it's been effectively an embargo on Russia's supply of crucial inputs. On the other hand, there was a great deal of discussion early on whether we can get European nations together to agree to stop buying Russian natural gas. And we never got anywhere on that. But that didn't matter because, in fact, there is an embargo on Russian natural gas, which is imposed by the Russians, who are using a cutoff of natural gas to Europe as a way to attempt to pressure Europe. Now, all of this, in terms of just quickly on the inflation side, initially there was a jump in commodity prices across the board. Oil, wheat, some other food commodities really jumped in price. A lot of that has gone away. Not all, but commodity prices have actually receded significantly from their peak, with one exception. The core of the problem now is just one thing. It is natural gas exports from Russia to Western Europe. So we look around and we realize that in addition to the sheer sort of physical limits, the risk of disruption of supply chains, we now have the extreme risk of geopolitical disruption of supply chains, all of which pushes us towards a reconsidering